Hello everyone and welcome back. We've reached edit page. You're gonna spend a lot of time in here if you're one-man band, if you do everything on your own. I mean editing, adding effects, color grading. Of course, if you're just a colorist, you're not gonna be interested in this page, but we're gonna cover it nonetheless. So to this point, you're gonna have to have some footage in here already because we moved through media page, through cut page, imported some footage. But if for some reason unknown to me, you do not have any media in here, we can import it directly onto edit page. And that's how we do it. We're gonna click on the media page, right click and find import media. We're gonna locate our folder, Control A to select everything inside that folder and click open. DaVinci is gonna ask a question. Do you want to change project frame rate? It means that some of the footage that we're importing in here has a different frame rate, and by default our settings in here are set to 24 frames per second, and some of the clips that I'm importing contain like 30 or maybe 120 frames per second. And if you want to change to that frame rate, you click change. I do not want to change that. I click do not change because I know that most of my media, they are at 24 frames per second. Now let's look at some controls. First of all, you can click your bins to display your bins if you need them. I'm just gonna deselect them. And the way everything looks in here is very similar, pretty much the same as media and cut page. If you haven't seen the previous video, watch them, because I explained the way everything could be displayed in here. Like this, like this, like this. I talk about all of that. We can also search some clips, the name of which we know, and we can organize them the way we want, right? We can also display dual panel media clip for some reason to drag one folder to another folder. If you have multiple folders, you're gonna open one, drag to another. Now you can make it shorter, make it longer. If you make it shorter, the timeline is going to be longer, it's going to occupy more space, and I think it is ideal because we are going to spend almost all of our time in the edit page in here in the timeline. But we get to that. Right now we're gonna go through these buttons and we'll see what each of them really do. Now, effects, we're gonna go through the effects maybe in the next video because I do not want to cover them in this one. But here we can find video transitions, audio transitions, some titles, generators. We're going to talk about them as well. Some effects, open effects, those are different, filters, audio effects, all of that is contained in here. Now, edit index, what is that? If you drag some footage, which automatically creates a timeline, I'm going to talk about that as well, and you make some changes, we cut this, we delete something, we just do some editing in here. Then when you open edit index, it's going to display every single action that we did to the clips, to the timeline. And if we add a second clip to it and start doing something else to it, it's going to display that as well. And as you can see, if we move through through the timeline, it's going to show the exact point at which we cut something, at which we did something. Okay, it's going to keep track of everything that is happening in here. Once we delete it, the edit index is deleted as well. And we're gonna delete timeline for now, this timeline, because we do not really need it right now. Now, sound library. DaVinci has a sound library, Fairlight sound library, and you can search some sound effects in here. Also, I connected a local database. I connected my personal sound library that I can search through. For example, I type whoosh, and there are some whooshes that are contained within the DaVinci Resolve, and also we can move downwards to find the whooshes that I imported in here. We're going to talk about that once we get to the Fairlight page, how to do that, how to import audio in here. I'm going to talk about that. Now, In the media pool, you can create bins, you can create organized bins, you can open bins in the separate windows. Everything is like we discussed before. If you haven't seen that, open like my tutorials on media page or on cut page and have a look how it's done. I'm not going to cover the same thing in here because it's going to make every tutorial repetitive, containing the same information as before. I do not really want that. Now, this is our viewer, okay? This viewer allows us to view source media. This is source media, and allows us to view timeline. What is the difference? Let me drag it in here. It's going to create again. It's going to create, just a moment. Yeah. What the hell is happening? Yeah. It's going to create a timeline. Now, as you can see, this is a timeline viewer. But what is the difference? Actually, we can view both the source viewer and the timeline viewer. And probably by default they are engaged, maybe not. I do not really remember at this point. I'm gonna click in here and it's going to display the source viewer and the timeline viewer. Now, the difference is, as I move through the timeline, you're going to see some changes in the timeline viewer. And the source viewer is only for the source clips. This is done so you can scrub through it, mark your in points, out points, and then drag your footage in here to import that. Now we're going to undo all of that. If you click in here and you have only one window, which is actually the way I prefer to work, you need to click on your footage that is in here to open source viewer. And now, the same way, you can drag, you can mark your in and out points, and I remind you it is done by clicking I for in points and O for out points, or I just typically drag the whole clip on the timeline and then find the point that I want, and then just simply cut it. As I drag in here, you see this viewer automatically switched to the timeline viewer. And when I click in here, it is switched to source viewer. I prefer to work this way because it is easier to me to have just one viewer rather than two. Okay? Because I typically import almost everything in here and then cut everything in here rather than finding in and out points. Now, as we talked before, if you accidentally just make it bigger, make it smaller, and do not know what to do, you just click fit. I said fit. Yeah, just click fit. Or you can press Z or Z again. Now, we have some options in here, and they are going to be different depending on whether this is the timeline viewer or the source viewer. And I'm going to show you what the difference is. We can close this for now. Right now, this is source viewer. And in the settings in here, we can show displayed audio, zoomed audio, or full clip audio, like I demonstrated the same thing in the cut page, right? But if we are at the timeline viewer and you click in here, those are not in here. We have gang viewers. I'll show you what it does. Show all video frames, show time codes, markers, and that's it. So the controls are different depending what type of viewer you are in right now. And you can see by the name, if it is the name of the file, it's called BRAW. The format, it means that at the bottom of the clip, you can see these video and audio icons for you to drag either only video or audio on the timeline. This is the source viewer. But once you are on a timeline, it says timeline. It is a timeline viewer. Now, what is these gang viewers? I'm going to display both of them, source viewer and timeline viewer, to demonstrate what this means. You can link, even if the clips are not like the same, if it's not the same clip, you can temporarily link the playheads of both timeline viewer and source viewer. For example, I set both of them at the beginning. As you can see, when I move the playhead of the source viewer, nothing is happening on the timeline viewer. But if I click in here, gang viewer, when you move your source viewer or the time viewer, doesn't matter, both of playheads are going to move at the exact same rate. But because timeline in this particular case is much longer, you can see that if we get past the length of the clip in the source viewer, it says media offline. It is helpful if you need to sync temporarily some clips in order to find a certain area of these clips, but I do not really use that. By the way, when you move to the right side, you're gonna see some mixer, metadata, and inspector. I'm gonna talk about that as well. But when we discuss this button, I talked before in the cut page, you can disengage your fusion effects and your color effects in order for your machine to play everything that you want to play smoothly, because those effects are typically heavy on your machine. But also you can right click and disengage either a color or fusion. For example, I want to have my color grades, but I want to bypass my fusion effects. I would click this button and the fusion effects will be bypassed, and the playback is going to be quite smooth. Right, I've got a list of things that I need to cover, otherwise I will be lost. So let me check just a little bit. Audio waveform display in the source viewer, edit overlays. Right, when you drag source footage, excuse me, when you drag source footage onto a timeline viewer, we're gonna have some options how to import that footage, like in the cut page. Drag it, and you see on the right we have some options. I'm not going to discuss them in here because I discussed them in the previous video dedicated to the cut page. Go and see that in order to understand what all of that means. So you can import your footage using this, for example, an insert. It's going to create an insert. Not the way I would prefer doing that, but that's an option that DaVinci has. Now let's finally get to the right side. First of all, we have some mixer. Mixer is going to demonstrate how loud the sound of this particular clip or clips underneath, well, clips created, for example. Let me do something like this. I'm going to drag only audio in here, and automatically it created a second audio track in here and the second audio track in here. And once I drag it, you're gonna see that the first audio is lower than the second one, and the resulting audio from bus 1 is going to be the resulting amount of volume that is going to be output into the final video if I choose to export it like this, right? We're going to talk about that in detail once we get to the sound, to the Fairlight. Now, metadata. I was talking about metadata before, but I didn't mention one thing, and the thing is that you can alter your metadata. I do not mean that you can alter the things that are in here by default that were created by your camera, but you can add a lot of information in here. You can click in here, and by the way, it works in the media page and on the cut page, doesn't really matter. You can click shot and scene and add a lot of information in here. You can click, then go to camera, add information in here. Some of the information is added by default because I used this camera. In the camera, created metadata for shutter, for angle, for camera FPS, for ISO, for white balance, for everything. Okay, but you can add like camera notes, camera serial number, media type, time-lapse intervals. All of that can be added to the metadata. It makes it then easier to sort through the files and to organize them inside of them some bins, either automatically or not, or manually. And inspector, I'm going to cover inspector in here. So inspector, allows us to change the media the way we want. What do I mean? First of all, if your inspector is open and you have no idea what it's displaying, to what clip it's referring to the clip that is selected right now. So I select this clip. As you can see, we have video portion and audio portion. This is because we have link selection. I'm going to talk about that a bit later. What does it mean? And we've selected both at the same time. Just by one click, we selected video and audio simultaneously. That's why we have subfolders in here, let's call them that, which are referring to the video portion and to the audio portion. You can alter this. As you can see, we alter in zoom. If you double click the name of this function, it's going to revert to the default settings. As you can see, there is a chain. You're gonna notice some of the settings have chains. It means once you alter in this parameter, the second parameter is going to be altered in the same way. You can unlink this and the video is going to be stretched or squeezed. Yeah, typically by default it is turned on. You can change your position, you can play with inspector, you can change any parameter you want. Right to the parameter or to the whole transform section, there is a diamond on the right. The diamond allows us to animate anything that inspector contains. And what do I mean? We go to this particular, by the way, let's make it a bit shorter to make it easier to work in here. Right, let's move this playhead in here and click this diamond. Once the diamond is clicked, we've created a point on the media that allows us to animate a portion of this clip. Now we move to the right several frames, several seconds, and change our zoom the way we want it to. As you can see, it automatically created a second keyframe. And now if we go, this arrow allows us to go back and forth between those keyframes. And now if we play this, we see that this parameter is changing over time. This is like basic animation of these parameters. As you can see, you can animate almost all of them. And if you want to undo something to revert, there is this button that can revert back your action, or you can revert everything that you've done. For example, you've done this, you've done that, and you click revert all the parameters. They all are going to revert to the default ones. Right? In about inspector, we're going to talk a lot during these tutorials. Well, once we get a little bit closer on that, and also we have an audio. As you can see, there are some portions in here that are dimmed out. This is because we have no effects on this clip. But if we had one, let's have some basic like lens blur. As you can see now, we can control in the same inspector, we can control the effect, and you control the strength of it. You can actually as well animate the strength of it, animate any parameter you have here. And it's really useful and comfortable way to work with media, because everything that you do inside of this is going to be displayed in the same area. And if you have video transition between clips, it's going to be in here. Transition, the length of transition, the type of transition, everything you want to be there. Yeah, this is inspector. And by the way, you can delete effect from here by clicking just delete. Now, there is no effect being on our media, right? This is inspector. Now, as you can see, we can expand this area as well. And now we're gonna move to timeline. We are done for this tutorial with inspector. You can play with this inspector yourself. I'm gonna to show you some things that you can do with it once we get to that part. Something more complicated than just changing the zoom or position or anything like this. Now, this thing is called a timeline. and this is a playhead. We created timeline just by dragging and dropping the clip onto it. You can create timeline differently. For example, we're going to delete this timeline. As you can see, the timeline disappeared. We have these clips in here, but what we've done with them disappeared because we deleted timeline. You can right click in here and create timeline using selected bin. It's going to create timeline containing all of these clips, and create a new multicam clip using select. No, this is not what we need. Yeah. Or we can select this clip and create new timeline using selected clips. It's going to give us the start time code, timeline name, number of video tracks, audio tracks. You can change it right in here if you know for sure that you need like, my God, 5 video tracks. You can specify it in here and click create. As you can see, it created 5 video tracks, 1 audio track, which you can move by dragging this thing that divides the area into video portion and audio portion, right? And you can delete this timeline in here. You can create as many timelines as you want, and sometimes it is necessary to create several timelines, and I'm going to show you why. But first of all, you can create a timeline, and typically I do it like this, just by dragging and dropping the footage. As you can see, timeline has been created automatically and placed into a media pool. It's going to be there. All of your timelines are going to be there. And as you can see, the clip that we used now has this red underline. It means that this clip is on our timeline. Okay, so if you cannot determine what clip is already on the timeline and what clip is not, you're gonna just have a look through this media and find this red line. Now, there is this thing that I never use, but I have to tell you about that. This thing is called playhead shadow. Yeah. View show playhead shadow. As you remember, before our playhead was just this red line, but now this containing like a shadow. The shadow is going to be by default 5 frames before, 5 frames after. Why do you really need that? First of all, it is easier to find our playhead now. And second of all, it shows us like the portion that we are selecting. For example, I know that this red area now represents 10 frames. You can change how much it is going to be on the left and on the right, going to DaVinci Resolve, Preferences, User, Editing. And once you go down to pre-playhead shadow length and post-playhead shadow length, as you can see, 5 frames on the left, 5 frames on the right. If you want, you can change that to your liking, but I do not really want to have playhead shadow. I do not really need it. Now, audio scrubbing. Audio scrubbing, you're not gonna hear that because I disengage capturing audio from the DaVinci itself, but this is like the audio portion of this clip. And if you click, it's probably going to be selected by default. When you drag your playhead over the clip, you're gonna hear some portions. I was talking about that in the settings video. You're gonna hear some portions of the audio. This way it is easy to find the portion of the clip just by hearing whether the person is talking or whether the sound effect is being played. It's easy to find, but sometimes it is a bit distracting, especially if you're working on some effects and you do not really need your audio. You can click Shift S and this thing is going to be disabled. Right now it is completely silent. If we click Shift S again, I now hear some portions of the audio being grabbed from when I drag this playhead over the clip. Right. I was talking before about multiple timelines, so let's look at that. First of all, I'm going to reduce this volume. Yeah, let's create multiple timelines. I select this clip, right click, and create new timeline. This timeline is going to be timeline 2. It doesn't really matter what kind of timeline it is. and we're going to create a separate timeline. Why it could be beneficial to have multiple timelines? First of all, we can have like edit that is referring to one particular scene in the movie that is heavy, particularly heavy on our graphics card, on our processor, in a separate timeline, and then just move it to the original timeline. Double click on the timeline is going to be opened in here. But if I, for example, want to have both of the timelines at the same time, there is a way to do that. You can click in here and go to this setting. It is called stacked timelines. You engage it and close this. And as you can see, we have timeline number 1, and you can switch to timeline number 2, right? It is called tapped timelines because there are tabs for each timeline. But it is actually can be much more interesting than this. If you click this button, you're going to have 2 timelines. We're gonna move it up here. You're gonna have 2 timelines at the same time. We're gonna select timeline number 2 in here and timeline number 1 in here. Why this could be beneficial? If I, for example, have all the files that I need for B-roll, and I hope you know what the B-roll is. Basically, we have the main footage, which is called A-roll, and we have supplementary footage that will be cut between the main footage, which is called B-roll. So I can arrange all of the clips that I consider B-roll in here, and all of my main clips down here below. And this way, if 2 people are talking about something, or like in here, there is a car, and I can show the person sitting in the car. I can simply drag this portion in here and insert it in here. So I have all of the B-roll up top and all of the A-roll down below. And I'm dragging and dropping my clips from above to below. And now we have this edit with the car, with the person sitting in it, and with the car again. So it is easier to edit this way some huge projects, because otherwise you need to zoom in, zoom out. That's why cut page is really effective, because it has zoomed out and zoomed in timelines. But you can create the same thing even more comfortable, more useful in the edit page. We are going to delete, by clicking this, we're going to delete this portion, and we're going to resize that back again. Right, and we're going to disengage this feature, and we are going to delete our first timeline. Right, so this is really comfortable, really useful to do that once you edit like huge projects. Now, we have what do we have here? Yeah, also you can engage your scopes in here. We're going to talk about scopes later once we get to the color page, but if you really need those scopes right now in here, before I thought that scopes are available only on the color page, but it is not the case. You can go to workspace and video scopes on, or you can use a shortcut, Control-Shift-W. Control-Shift-W, and we have scopes. What is happening in here is this thing allows us to view our project objectively. So you're looking at the picture and you have no idea whether the highlights are clipping, how high are they, how saturated are they, what color is the skin, is the correct color or not. The scopes are going to show us everything. But again, I'm not going to discuss them in here. We're going to talk about that later once we get to the color page. For now, we're just going to close it, but I showed you how to open them if you really need one. Now, let's talk about some of these tools and parameters. First of all, like before, like in the cut page, we have snapping. And snapping allows us to snap clips once we get closer to the playhead or to another clip, the clip is going to snap into position. It is really useful when you editing, because otherwise, and to disable or enable snapping, otherwise it is difficult to just to put it in here and not overlap with the previous clip. Okay, so don't forget to enable snapping. Also, there is this linked selection. It means that when it is engaged, when I select video clip, it's going to select the corresponding audio clip as well. And once I click audio, it's going to select video. You can disengage that, but it is better to do it in a different way. If we want to select only the video portion of this clip, just press Alt and press on the video. It's going to select only the video portion or the audio portion the same way of the original clip. Right. As you can see, we have some video tracks in here. You can add tracks. You can add tracks simply by dragging your footage in here, for example, like this, and it's going to add a third one. Yeah, this is the way you can add them. Audio track selector, disable video. You can also lock, so you cannot change anything in here. The same goes for video. And we also have this position lock. If you are worried that your precious project will be ruined by accidentally moving some of these clips, you can engage this, and now you cannot move your clip. As before, we talked about markers. You can create, by pressing M, you can create different markers. But now you can not only create them on your timeline, you can create them within the clip. If I select the clip and click M, it is now, we have a marker that is selected for the video and audio portions of the clip. Because sometimes I need to select a marker not for a particular time of the timeline, but particular time of the clip. And this way you can create a marker for the clip only. Now, the way everything looks in here can be altered right in here. These parameters are time view options, disable or enable subtitles, and audio waveforms. If you just disable it, it is blank. I do not suggest that, but because a lot of things that you're going to stack on top of each other are going to be in sync with audio. That's why disengaging that, it's not really a good idea. Video viewing option, it can be displayed either as a film strip, like right now. As you can see, it displays several frames, how the frames are changing within the clip, and it's the most representative way to present video, in my opinion. But if you are not in agreement with me, you can use thumbnail view, right? It's going to put just thumbnail in the beginning, thumbnail at the end, and that's it. Or you can just click this. If you know you need to buy some real estate in here, you can engage this and then change the video portion and the audio portion. This way they are going to occupy the minimum amount of the real estate in here. But this is only if you remember by the name what is going to happen in here, or if you are willing to drag over by playhead and viewing the viewer what is happening on your timeline. Now, and for audio, it's pretty much the same, several parameters. Display non-rectified or rectified waveform, full waveform, yeah, and this is waveform border. It's going to make your waveform, we're going to increase that so we can see. Yeah, border is going to make it more prominent, easier to see. And this is, as I said before, is going to change the sizing of your audio and video tracks. What is the perfect sizing for you? Choose it for yourself. Now, we're going to change the like sizing, how close or how far we are from the timeline. And it can be changed in here, but it is easier to change by pressing Alt and using your scroll wheel. The same way you can drag this thing along your timeline, or you can press Ctrl and again just a moment. You can press your control and move your scroll wheel to move through your timeline. And you have these controls in here. This is custom zoom, the way I was doing and the way I'm doing always. This is the selection full extent zoom. It is going to show you all the media on your timeline, your whole timeline. And this is detail zoom. It is going to zoom in to show you the clip that you are actually to show where your playhead. It's going to zoom in onto the clip to make it easier for you to edit. I'm going to make it like, yeah, quiet. All of these parameters will be discussed later in the second part of the edit, where we would discuss how to edit all of that. Right? Also, there is an interesting feature I'm going to show you, and that's probably going to be about it. If I create a portion of a clip, and then I'm going to copy it, no, not like that, copy it several times. There is a way to see if I'm using the same portion of the clip several times or not. It is called duplicate frame detection. View, show duplicate frames. They are highlighted. It means that this is the same clip, absolutely the same clip that is used several times on the timeline. You do not really want to do that because, well, it is easy really to spot this when you are watching some content, and that's why you have this tool that is going to show you whether you're using it or not. It's going to view, show duplicate frames, right? Now, that is probably all that I wanted to talk about. Scroll on through time, or resize in video tracks, tapped, stacked, duplicate frame detection. Yeah, this is probably all that I wanted to talk about in this episode, and the next episode will be dedicated exclusively to the editing, because we need to talk about all of the controls that are in here, how to edit video, how to edit audio, what to do in here. But if you are familiar with like Adobe Premiere or Final Cut, it's going to be pretty similar. That's why I like working in the edit. It is like a universal thing. But we're going to talk about that in the next episode. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.